welcome to the Water and Graves podcast. I'm your host, Allie, and joining me today is Angie Miller of Stitch Morgantown. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm very excited to have you on today. Angie is the owner of Stitch Morgantown, and it's located in Morgantown, West Virginia. And you have a sewing quilt craft shop, I guess. Is that how you would describe it?
Yeah, lots of fabric and quilt patterns. So even though I didn't want to be classified as a quilt shop initially, that's what I call myself now. It's the easiest way to classify me.
Yeah. A little bit of everything going on in there with the quilts being maybe the primary thing. But I'm very excited to have you on the podcast to learn more about how you were able to go from starting as kind of an Etsy shop and then growing and then now you have a physical storefront location in Morgantown. And I think that's a goal that a lot of small business owners have and creatives. I know for me, it's one of mine is to one day have a storefront. So I'm really pumped to learn more about your journey and kind of how you manage to go from Etsy to having your own store, which is amazing. So thanks again so much for being on. And I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are.
Well, you've already introed me. I'm Angie Miller. I am an early 40s-ish. We'll just leave it at that person. My job, my 9 to 5 is as an RN, and I've been a nurse for a little over 20 years now. Love nursing, don't love all that goes with it. I'm sure I'm not the only one there, and have always really enjoyed sewing and, the more creative things. I have one kiddo who is 11 in 5th grade, and he also keeps me on my toes as well. But that's just a little bit about me.
I bet, yeah. So do you still work 9 to 5 as well as having your storefront?
I am doing 2 days a week working as a nurse. One day the shop is closed and another day I have an employee here.
Wow, that is insane to me. That's so impressive. So impressive that you've kept being an RN and I don't know. Anytime I hear that someone has the mental capacity to do multiple things like that, it blows my mind.
Some days I wonder if I do have the mental capacity. But no, the nursing 2 days a week, the first 8 months that I was full-time with the business, I did have enough saved that I was able to focus on the business. And then my bank account was like, girl, you need to get back to work. And so really those 2 days a week nursing are what keep me going at home until the business is, debt-free and able to give me a nice paycheck.
Yeah, that's smart. You're able to kind of fund the dream a little bit.
Yeah.
When did you open Stitch?
I opened the store here in Morgantown in the end of January 2018. I did a grand opening early February, and the only time I've been closed was about half of March and all of April of 2020 when we had a mandatory shutdown.
Yeah, so you're still pretty new. Your business is still in its youth.
Yep, haven't hit my 5-year mark yet.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm kind of curious a little bit about what it was that kind of inspired you to open the shop. Have you always been a sewer or is quilting something that is in your family that you kind of wanted to carry on in some form? Or what I guess is your background with sewing and quilting?
I started sewing primarily cross stitch when I was about 7 years old. I had a friend that entered a little piece in a local county fair and got a blue ribbon for her project that she did. And I thought, that's pretty cool. I think I'd like to do that. And my mom, she was into cross stitching, sewing. She did a lot of painting, ceramic work. So I guess just being exposed to it at a young age. And then I really started sewing on the machine more in junior high and high school. And then when I moved away for college, I started making a lot of gifts, the poor college student trying to make it for the holidays and give something that had a little bit of meaning and wasn't going to cost me a lot of money. So yeah, it's always been something that I've done throughout my life, really, as long as I can remember. I don't know if I have many memories before age 7.
Yeah, that's impressive. Like, I can't even think of like having a hobby like that at the age of 7, especially like cross stitching, which even just recently I was like, oh yeah, cross stitching, right? Like, you're just threading the needle, but there's like all these different types of stitches and patterns, and it's way more complicated than I had kind of like dumbed it down to in my brain to like deal with it, I guess. And so yeah, being able to do that at 7 is really, I don't know, I think it's kind of impressive.
Well, thank you. I had mom there, anytime the thread got knotted, it was, Mom, I have a knot. You need to help me. So having a supportive parent definitely helped me learn and grow.
Definitely. And so you opened your storefront in 2018, but before that, you opened an Etsy shop like 10 years earlier, I think.
Yeah.
Like in 2008, and you were primarily selling like patterns. Is that right?
No, I was doing a lot of handmade stuff, like really small projects. And a lot of it was like housewares items, for lack of a better term. But like I would draw little things and put my designs in fabric on like a little kitchen hand towel, and then sew some pom-pom fringe or rickrack. And it was just kind of like a fun retro kind of vibe with a lot of stuff. And it was just a creative outlet at that point. But I certainly didn't need, 20 different kitchen towels for my own kitchen. So that's when I, came across Etsy and thought what a cool little venue that was online, and thought I would give it a go and see if anybody besides myself wanted to purchase my stuff.
I love that. Yeah, I am almost reaching that point with my knitting, because I just like to knit scarves, because you don't have to like think a whole lot when you're doing scarves, unless you're doing like a pattern of some sort. But it's gotten to the point where I have so many.
Yeah, you only have one neck. So
yeah, I'm like, what do I do with these? So, and my poor family, I'm sure they're like tired of getting scarves for every holiday. So I have to branch out a little bit. When you started your Etsy shop, did you have kind of like any idea or like an inkling that like, one day this is going to turn into a storefront? Like, did you know then that you wanted to eventually have a shop?
I mean, it was always kind of a dream in the back of my mind. I don't know that at that time I ever thought that it would actually come to be just one of those things, like, oh, someday when I'm rich, or, And the longer I was working full time and just, the creative outlet was so much more fulfilling for me. And I'm like, okay, how can I make this my primary, what I'm doing every day? And I don't know, probably somewhere in my mid 30s, I decided, I need to start looking into this a little more seriously. And if I want to ever have a shot at it, I need to set a goal and look at writing a business plan and figuring out what all would actually go into opening up a storefront.
Yeah, and you have like I think it's interesting, kind of your journey to opening your storefront and how you kind of used the resources that were available to you in Morgantown, which we'll get into here in a little bit. But, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this, but there are quite quilting and like sewing shops and knit stuff, I guess, or knit shops, fiber arts shops, there we go, maybe, are kind of popular in your area, right?
They are, but the thing that I was finding, like when I was working on projects, the designers and the fabrics that I wanted weren't available locally. West Virginia is just, kind of an older traditional state. And even though we do have a lot of handicrafts and people that do that type of stuff, a lot of the local shops were more traditional and maybe, a lot of floral patterns and not the bright, bold, funky, fun kind of things that I was looking for. So I was having to order most of my stuff online.
And when you started thinking about opening your shop, were you worried at all about kind of the competition in the area with the other shops, or, were you thinking, I'm opening a shop because these are the things that I'm missing from the local area, so maybe others are as well?
Even though, I knew about the other shops in the area, I also kind of knew that what I planned to offer was something that they weren't offering. And even still, after being in business for 4 years, if I go visit another shop close by, I can usually maybe find 5 or 6 things that we have that we share in common as far as fabrics or supplies. But everybody really kind of has their own vibe and feel when you walk in the store. So I just felt like it was a different little niche that I was going to be filling.
That's nice. Yeah. Have diversity within the fiber space community, I guess, within town. And so Etsy shop in 2008, you're working full time, and then you go, you know what, now's the time. I'm going to open the storefront. Like, it's going to happen. First off, what was it that pushed you to finally go, now is the time? Like, everything's looking good. Like, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. Or, like, what was the moment where you're just like, I gotta do this. Like, I gotta have my own shop.
Don't know that it was anything that I did or thought, but there was another local shop that was looking to sell in my hometown. And she was wanting to sell the building and the business. And I went to talk with her. And when I say the building, it also had an apartment, a garage, about an acre of land. And it just financially was more than I wanted to bite off. But I would also be getting all of that inventory. And I knew that that wasn't my vision for the store. But when I was looking into that, I thought I need somebody that has some knowledge and can give me a little guidance, because I felt I was very much out of my wheelhouse as far as knowing what's good and bad when looking at buying another business.
And that's where you really, I guess, like, your process really kind of started with getting your business. And can you walk us through that? Because again, I think it's so, I don't know, I feel like it's unique, but I don't know if it is or not. I guess I haven't heard anyone else talk about it, but you were able to kind of really tap into your local resources and have them kind of walk you through the process. So can you
absolutely
share that?
Yeah. And they were great. I really had no idea where to begin. And I thought, who can I call locally that can give me some guidance here? So I called my local chamber of commerce, and while they didn't have anything specific to offer me as just like fact finding, they did point me in the direction of our Small Business Development Center in West Virginia that is part of the Small Business Association. And that, at least for us here in West Virginia, I'm not sure about other states, is something that they offer coaches for starting small businesses, and you go meet with them at free of charge. And they kind of guide you through the process and can tell you, yes, that's a good idea, or, you need to look at this. This isn't wise. Have you considered, XYZ? So I made an appointment with them and got hooked up with a business coach in my area. And the first thing, when I presented the business opportunity, he sat kind of quietly, considered it, and listened to me. And then he asked me a question like, what is your dream, and what kind of business do you want? And I started talking about that and like all of the things that I would want to change if I bought this existing business. And he said, you didn't seem very excited when you talked about the business opportunity, but when you talked about what you wanted to do with it, he could tell that my whole personality changed. I was a lot more animated talking about it. And he said, I don't think buying somebody else's business is the way you want to go. You want to start from scratch. And I appreciated that.
Mm-hmm. I like that you were able to like link up with a business coach and a mentor. And what was he like? It sounds like he was able to kind of help you brainstorm a little bit about like what you wanted or where you saw your business going. Were there other things that he was kind of able to assist you with?
Yeah, after that meeting, we talked about, what are some of the things that I would need to do if I was serious about starting my own business. And the first thing that he told me I needed to do was market research. And I'm like, okay, where do you even start with that? And I don't know that there is a really good answer for that, but we talked about my hometown is kind of situated in between two other cities that are within 20 miles on the interstate. So it was like, I need to look at the whole area and decide where might be a good location. So I pulled census data, which isn't always the most up to date, but it really is kind of all I had to go on. So, trying to focus on who's my customer. Obviously, for me, women is the primary customer base. And then, what age group did I think I was going to bring in? What kind of income are these people having? Do they have kids? How much time do they have? And then trying to find info on how much do people that quilt and sew spend on it per year. That was probably the most challenging thing. After a lot of digging and just searching different terms, I was able to find a few articles that gave, some rough ideas. But again, they're just articles written by other people that so there were no hard, fast numbers. But after I got all that together, we started putting all of that information into a business plan, and they gave me some resources to use to formulate the plan and, ultimately look at what are my startup costs going to be and predict what I think my income and expenses are going to be over the course of the first 3 years of the business. So it was a lot of stuff that I never in a million years would have thought like through that much stuff in that much depth.
Yeah, that sounds like on one hand, I'm like, oh, that's like really overwhelming. But then like on the other hand, my like very nerdy self is like, oh, lovely. Like to have the plan and to like, have an idea of where you want to go in 3 years and have kind of those goals and steps to get there, and knowing your demographic are all like such vital things in business. And I mean, we kind of say the same thing in podcasting and everything like that. So it's so smart to sit down and kind of like work through all that leading up to opening your business.
Yeah, it's, and I will say it has changed drastically as time has gone on. I don't necessarily pull out my original business plan anymore. But in the very beginning, I did refer back to it a lot, and it gets you thinking about expenses that maybe I wouldn't have otherwise thought about. I know having a security system was one thing that I hadn't thought about. We don't live in a high crime area, but he explained that usually for insurance purposes, if you have a security system, it'll help you on insuring your space and your inventory. And I'm like, oh, never thought about that, Yeah. And he was also able to help once I had decided, what I was going to need as far as startup costs, pointing me in the right direction for resources that would be able to help out with a small business loan.
Nice. And with the business plan, were there like online, I guess, like templates or things like that you were able to use? Or did your business coach have a kind of something, like a fill in the blank type of business plan that you could work with?
I had already started using a template that was on the SBA website. And then after I met with him, he had a software program that was a little more user friendly. You could make more charts and do fun things with it.
Oh, nice.
And he was able to give me access as part of the program to be able to use that.
Ooh, I love a good chart.
I know, pie charts, bar graphs.
Yes.
Great.
My little like Excel heart is happy hearing about charts.
Yeah.
So after you went through your business planning process, like how long between kind of going through that did it take before you were able to find a space to rent?
So I want to say I initially started working on the plan the end of 2016. And then probably early on in 2017, I said, is this something I could realistically do by the end of the year, beginning of next year? And he was like, well, yeah, it depends how motivated you are. And so finding some spaces and figuring out what it was going to cost to lease a space and how much space did I need. And, that all went into consideration. And I had never dealt with renting a commercial space. I first just started looking for signs on the front of empty storefronts and calling and, trying to get an idea, even if I knew it wasn't going to be a good location for my store, just to try and get an idea of what the market was like.
Yeah, I can't even wrap my brain around that process.
Yeah, I mean, it really was just making cold phone calls and trying to find out what I could find out. And, the business coach had told me most commercial leases are 5 years. I was lucky to find a landlord who is very small business friendly and was willing to do a 3-year lease. And the lease terms are not super restrictive. And I really lucked out with a good landlord. I will say that.
Oh, nice. I'm still just as we're having this conversation, just blown away that you were like, I'm going to open a business. And then you did it. That's so awesome. Because I don't know, I just imagine it had to be so kind of nerve-wracking to just be like,
oh, very much.
I'm going to do this.
I mean, after I had the space, because it was the space I ended up leasing had another store in it, and it was something very mechanical, like hydraulic pipes and hoses and fittings. And so the inside, they had to, totally strip it down. I was able to specify the build out, but had signed the lease and had the keys, and I'd come over and check it out. And it finally got built, and it was time to, put my notice in at work. And I may have had more than one mini meltdown. What am I doing? Have I lost my mind? And I still have that from time to time, even 4 years in. What am I doing?
Yeah, oh my gosh. I can't imagine, but I'm sure there are moments that are just absolutely terrifying, followed by moments that are just awe-inspiring, where you're just I'm doing this. I have a business. This is something I've wanted, and now I have it. And I don't know, that's just got to feel so amazing.
It does. And usually when you're at your low point, asking yourself, am I crazy? And what have I done with my life? Then that very next day or very next week, something amazing happens. And it's this is why I'm doing it. So thankfully, I've never had the what am I doing not followed by an affirming moment.
That is good. So I love that you were able to you definitely tapped into local resources and use them to get up and running. What are some of the, I don't want to say cons, I guess, but what are some of the things that you experienced while opening your storefront that were maybe surprising to you that you weren't expecting?
There were definitely a few, in the process of writing my business plan and trying to figure out, how much are my utilities going to cost every month? You're just estimating and guessing at that point. And there's not a real great science to a lot of that. And I know one of the things that shocked me most when I moved into the space and started calling to have my utilities, moved from my landlord's name into my name, commercial utility accounts had huge deposits. And I realize that may be regional, but here I am thinking, it's going to be like turning on the electric and gas at your house. And yeah, that wasn't the case. So that was a bit surprising. And just all, you account for taxes and all that. And the business coach was great about helping with that. But then the local things that they may not be aware of, I'm in a city that has a B&O tax, which I knew about that one coming in. But then the county that my business is located in, West Virginia, has a property tax, and we actually get taxed on our inventory every year and have to pay property tax on it. So I didn't have a good grasp on what that kind of stuff was going to look like until I got into it. And, a few $100s for a property tax bill is a big deal when you're brand new.
Yeah. Yeah. That $100 can go a long ways towards something else.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Taxes.
There were little things like that came up along the way. And I would say I'm constantly learning new things every day that I'm here.
And I guess, I don't know, let's do the opposite of that, I guess. What have been some of the best moments that you've experienced since opening your storefront?
Just probably the support from the community, and some of my customers when I first opened have become true friends outside of the business, and I'm very thankful for that. A couple people that I ended up hiring as staff to help here started out as just people walking in to see what the store was all about. And so I was a little afraid of leaving my full-time job and being here alone. I'm an introvert by nature, but I did worry about not having the relationships with coworkers. But I have found that there are customers that I now have those relationships with. And it's fun helping people pick things out for new projects and hear their creative ideas. I love knowing what other people are working on.
I bet that you're just like, I don't know, I'm just imagining it. Like you're just in a creative space like all the time. And like you said, being able to be around other creative folks and to talk with them about their projects. Like, I bet that is just amazing. That's gotta be, I don't know. I imagine that would be high up on my list, my personal list of like wins for having a store.
Yeah. And I do offer, one of the other things when I opened up, some of the other shops that teach classes, I had gotten some feedback from the community, like, I feel like you already have to know how to sew and know what you're doing to take a class there. Like, it's very intimidating. And I'm like, I don't want that to be the vibe here. Like, I want people to come in who have never sewn before and feel comfortable taking a lesson, learning about the machine, and making a simple project. Like, I want to foster new people into sewing.
No,
I don't want to steer them away.
No, and that's like, so when I used to live in like Old Town Alexandria, Virginia, and there's an amazing yarn shop there and called Fiberspace. And they would hold these classes and they were absolutely amazing. And they had that same kind of atmosphere where it was like, you can be a beginner and go in there and they will literally help you pick out everything you need to begin, to just start. But then they also, if you have been a knitter your entire life, can, take care of you too. And there are shops that you walk into and it's very intimidating because everything is just like, what is this? I don't know where to start. Like, how do I do things? So I think anytime you can kind of foster that environment of like, this is a safe space where you can learn and ask all the questions you need to, is absolutely wonderful, especially for crafty stuff.
I even teach kids. 7 is probably about the youngest age, and it depends on how motivated the kid is. But I think those are some of my most fun classes when I'm teaching kids, and especially when I can see that they're really liking it and we get to the end of a project and like they've made a pillowcase for their pillow on their bed and they're so proud of it. And it's like, yep, you made that, you did that. So before I went into nursing, I had considered being a teacher, and I'm able to do that here without being a teacher.
Oh, I love that. And it reminds me back when I was a young one, our library used to have like summer camps. And at one summer camp, they taught us how to sew, and we made little bears. And I kid you not, anytime I have to sew something now, I have flashbacks to like sewing that bear together. And I'm like, okay, I can do it. I can do it. Like, I just got to know a basic stitch. If I can make a bear, by God, I can stitch this thing together. So even like the smallest thing when you're that young can, I mean, literally stick with you for the rest of your life. So that is just so cool that you get to teach youngins classes. I love that.
Well, and I don't think they offer home ec in a lot of schools anymore, even as an elective class.
Oh yeah. I didn't think about that.
So a lot of times it'll be even young adults like, hey, can you teach me how to use my sewing machine? And I just want to be able to fix if I have a seam that came apart, or be able to hem a pair of pants, which is really basic stuff. And, I think a lot more people are being more conscious about mending and, hanging on to things and not being wasteful. So that's been, one of the things I want to try and help out with too.
Oh, wait. I love it so much. That's so awesome. I do have a question. This is one I've wondered a lot for myself as someone who like is a bit of an introvert and also has like anxiety and depression. Like when I think about having a shop and having to like have it open all the time and to be there and be present like constantly, it does seem overwhelming. Do you ever have those moments where you're like, oh, I just need to close the shop for like a day, or like I'm not going to open today because I just am like not feeling, I can't people, like, do you have those moments? And if so, like, how do you kind of overcome that? Like, do you have a way to, I don't know, like pump yourself up to get yourself moving, I guess, or like any, I don't know, how do you overcome that?
Well, I'm terrible at that. I think nurses are terrible at taking care of themselves. Even though I am more on the introvert side with my nursing and, always having done something customer service based, I'm not afraid to talk to people, especially one-on-one or, in a small group. It's not that I'm not friendly. Large groups intimidate me and drain me. So if I have a day where I'm having a sale or an event and there's a lot of people in and out, usually I do those on a Saturday because I know I have Sundays off to recover. But actually closing and taking some time, I'm starting to do that now, realizing that it is essential because I'm going to burn out if I don't. Like last week, I closed Friday and Saturday for Easter weekend and spent the time at home with my son, and it was wonderful. And, I didn't have anybody call and yell at me because I wasn't open. Like the world is not going to end if a quilt shop is not open and they can't get their piece of fabric on Good Friday. So yeah, it's still a work in progress trying to find that balance.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. It's one of the things I think about a lot. Someone who's, wants to have a storefront one day, but I'm like, oh, could I do it? Like mentally, because it just seems like so much.
When I first opened, it was just me. I didn't have any employees, but I knew that I didn't want to be here every Saturday that my son was with me. So at that time, I had some great friends that were working full time, but very supportive of me opening and agreed to rotate and work a Saturday a month. And that was a good way to give me some downtime from here and not have to deal with people every weekend.
Yeah, that's nice. Get 2 days off instead of just one.
Yes.
Oh, that's lovely. It's great that you have friends that are willing to support you in your business venture. So as we begin to wrap up, I'm curious, do you have any advice for creatives or, like crafters and makers that are interested in opening their own like physical storefront?
I would definitely check to see if you have a small business development center in your area. I do not think I would have made it to getting the business opened had I not had that support and guidance. And like I said, I'm not sure if that's available in every state. I know the whole state of West Virginia, it's available. It's free. I still touch base with them from time to time if I'm struggling with something, and, they'll follow up with you.
That's
but
nice.
Yeah, I think having that guidance just to help me along the way.
No, I love that. And it's also like, I feel like it's probably like a bit of like accountability too. Like if you're maybe unsure of something or not moving along with something because it's like, you're scared to pull the trigger or something, kind of having that person there to kind of talk you through it and guide you, I'm sure was just extremely helpful.
Yeah, I've said many times, opening your own business is not for the faint of heart because it is scary every day.
Yeah.
But also so rewarding. Like I don't regret doing it at all. And I'm like, the worst that happens is I get so many years down the road and it's just not feasible. But at least I can say that I gave it my all and I tried.
Exactly. That is all you can do.
Yep.
Do you have anything coming up that you're working on or that you'd like to share with listeners? Any workshops or classes you got coming up in July, I guess?
I don't have July planned out yet, but every month I offer between 4 and 5 different classes, workshops. Tuesday evenings and Saturday afternoons are typically my days. And I'm also working on a couple other things, a sew along, a block of the month, and then also working on a podcast that will be tied to the store, but I'm not real sure on the details of that yet. So yeah, there's lots of things in the works, and I send out a monthly newsletter telling everybody what's coming up for the following month.
Oh, amazing. You're busy.
Yeah.
Where can folks find you and how can they sign up for your monthly newsletter?
The website for the store is at stitchmorgantown.com. And there's a link at the bottom, or when you try to navigate away from the site, a little box will pop up and ask if you'd like to be on the email newsletter. And I don't send a bunch. It's all I can do to send one a month. So I'm not going to junk up people's spam. And then I post pretty frequently and regularly on Facebook under Stitch Morgantown and Instagram, Stitch Morgantown. And then I've also recently started a TikTok that's a little out of my comfort zone, but I'm working on it. And that one is under So Angie.
So Angie. Oh, wonderful. I'm going to find you on TikTok. I think it's the only account I'm not following yet. So I'll get you on there. Angie, thanks so much for joining me today. It's been really insightful and interesting to hear your journey to opening your shop. And I think it's the information you shared I personally found it very informative and useful. It makes me want to go and see if there's a small business development center here in North Carolina. So thank you so much for sharing your journey with us.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on. It's been fun.
Absolutely. And as Angie mentioned, you can find her on Instagram and Facebook at Stitch Morgantown, and her website is stitchmorgantown.com, and also on TikTok at So Angie. I would also highly recommend checking out the website because, one, it's not only adorable just in its design, but there's tons of information on classes. You have patterns, you've got kits up that you've put together, just all kinds of amazing stuff. So definitely check out the website and maybe start sewing or quilting if you're not already doing so, because Angie and Stitch Morgantown have everything you need to get started. So thank you again so much, Angie.
Thank you.
And with that, listeners, I would like to thank you for tuning into today's episode. If you have any questions or comments for me or for any of my guests, including Angie, you can text or call us on our hotline at 252-419-6004. You can leave us a voicemail or again, text us, and we will include those questions and answers in a future episode of the podcast. You can also follow us on Instagram at Wandering Creative Pod, and be sure to rate, and review the Wandering Creatives podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Wandering Creatives podcast, a CEI media production. Please like, rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast as it helps us greatly. You can follow us on Instagram at Wandering Creatives Pod and on Facebook at Wandering Creatives Podcast. If you would like to support the podcast, you can become a Patreon for just $5 a month. The link is in the episode description.